Yes, Mrs. Renshaw. I hear you loud and clear, Alyssa Granger said through gritted teeth, pasting on a smile that was more practiced than pleasant. Absolutely, she added, her voice clipped but steady. I'll handle it immediately. Will this woman ever shut up? She thought, biting back a sigh as the chairman's insufferable wife continued to drone on. As Birch Grove's development director, it was Alyssa's job to pretend she cared, nod, smile, play the part, even when dealing with wealthy narcissists who believed their money made them matter. I've had it with these arrogant parasites, she fumed inwardly. One glance at her watch made her irritation spike. She was already running late for a crucial meeting. She was seconds from cutting the woman off when, thankfully, Mrs. Renshaw finally wrapped it up herself. Oh dear, I simply cannot be late for my hairdresser, the woman trilled. Of course, Mrs. Renshaw. My apologies for taking up your precious time, Alyssa said smoothly, concealing every ounce of annoyance behind polished professionalism. The moment the call ended, she fired off a quick text to her husband, dinner with a client. Don't wait up. She tidied her desk, gave her reflection a quick once-over, and grabbed her purse before stepping out of her makeshift office, formerly the butler's pantry of Birch Grove Mansion. Off for the day, Senora Granger? Her assistant Maya called from down the hall. Without slowing, Alyssa shot back, donor meeting. Then I'm done. Maya watched her disappear down the polished marble corridor, then slipped into the executive director's office. Did he already head out? About 10 minutes ago, Natalie replied. Said it was urgent. Maya rolled her eyes. Every week. Like clockwork. She gestured toward the exit and scoffed. They really think we don't notice? Morons. The two women laughed, then returned to their work. Meanwhile, Professor Ethan Granger scanned the lecture hall, sensing most of his students were already mentally checking out. He tapped his tablet, cueing a graph onto the big screen behind him. Today, we're diving into supply, demand, and pricing, he announced. A dramatic groan erupted from the back row, earning scattered chuckles. Ethan smirked. Yeah, I get it. Sounds dry. But trust me, these ideas shape the world around us. Let me show you. He held up a framed print. Anyone recognize this? That's Andy Warhol's Marilyn Monroe, a student called out. Right artist, wrong canvas. Ethan quipped, triggering a ripple of laughter. But yes, you're on point. In 2022, a similar painting sold for $195 million, the most ever paid for an American artwork. A few students whistled in disbelief. Any billionaires in the room? Ethan teased. No, didn't think so. Yet you could walk into a bookstore and snag a poster of this for $20. So what gives? He raised a hand before the know-it-alls could jump in. Yes, there are other factors. But price? That's the biggest driver of demand. After class, Ethan was pleased to see several students stick around, engaged in animated conversation. At least they're thinking, he thought, a small sense of accomplishment washing over him. Back in his office, he checked his phone. Dinner with a client. Don't wait, Alyssa's message read. The now familiar knot in his stomach returned. These client dinners were happening more often lately. Still, her absence gave him time to visit his father. Walter Granger had been fighting Parkinson's for years, stubbornly clinging to the old family home despite declining health. Ethan had hired multiple caregivers over time, each one fired, until Marisol arrived. She had two undeniable advantages: striking beauty, which Walter shamelessly admired, and a will of steel. If he barked, she barked louder. If he resisted, she pushed right back. Eventually, Walter had given a rare nod of approval. She's not a pushover, he had said with a faint smirk. About 10 months into the job, Marisol surprised Ethan. This is my son, Leo, she told him. My mother was watching him, but now she's caring for my sick grandmother. I can't juggle both your father and Leo. Walter, unexpectedly, came up with a solution. Move in. This place has plenty of room. I'll handle rent and groceries. Marisol hesitated. And Leo? You sure you want a 6-year-old underfoot? Walter scoffed. I raised one here before. He can keep me company when I get tired of you. She brought the offer to Ethan. It's your call, he said. Honestly, Dad needs company, and I'd sleep better knowing someone he trusts is close. Marisol nodded, but her tone softened. You might consider visiting more often, for his sake. And for Leo's. A faint blush crept onto her cheeks before she turned and walked off, leaving Ethan a bit confused, but mostly relieved that she accepted. 18 months later, the setup was better than anyone had hoped. Walter actually listened to Marisol, and Ethan didn't mind sticking around for dinner. Her cooking was far superior to anything served at the university cafeteria. Alyssa loathed the long, winding drive through the countryside, but discretion was non-negotiable. Neither she nor Bryce could risk being seen together while cozying up to potential donors. The sight of dilapidated homes and rusting trailers only deepened her scorn. Places like this still exist? She sneered internally. I grew up in a dump like this. After her father abandoned them, Alyssa, her sister, and their overwhelmed mother barely scraped by. Mocked at school, she had thrown herself into academics, eventually landing a full scholarship to the University of Pennsylvania. While her classmates partied and jetted off to Europe, Alyssa juggled classes and multiple part-time jobs. Everything shifted her senior year when Ethan Granger, charming, intelligent, and full of ambition, started showing interest. He was exactly the kind of man who opened doors. Alyssa had dated before, but never recklessly. She knew the cost of a bad reputation, especially for a woman. Ethan wasn't just a boyfriend. He was a stepping stone. He never stood a chance, she thought with a self-satisfied smile. But her carefully laid plans began to unravel when Ethan turned down lucrative finance roles and chose the modest, predictable path of academia instead. Alyssa had once hoped Ethan would chase something more ambitious, maybe climb the ladder into university leadership. After all, economics professors had made it to college presidencies before. But 7 years into their marriage, here she was, trapped in a sleepy academic town, suffocating while Ethan seemed perfectly content lecturing undergrads. This isn't the future I signed up for, she thought bitterly. To keep from going insane, she'd taken a job at Birch Grove Mansion and Museum, the former estate of a wealthy oil baron, and, in many ways, it felt like a twisted joke. She spent her days smiling through inane conversations with trust fund aristocrats, pretending to care about social calendars and charity luncheons. Not for much longer, she thought as she pulled into a quiet, out-of-the-way motel parking lot. She had found her escape route, and she wasn't looking back. Elsewhere, Ethan stepped out of his car at his father's house just as the front door flung open and a blur of motion bolted toward him. "Senior Ethan, come play soccer," Leo shouted, bouncing with excitement. "Leo," Marisol called out sharply, "let Senior Ethan rest, Carino. He's had a long day." Ethan laughed, waving her off. "No worries. Let's see what you've got, little man." Moments later, they were kicking a worn-out soccer ball back and forth across the yard, laughter floating through the crisp evening air. From his spot on the porch, Walter watched with a half-smile, cheering like it was the final match of the World Cup. By the time Marisol called them in for dinner, Ethan was huffing. "I'm too old for this kid's energy," he joked, catching his breath. He expected something Latin-inspired, but was pleasantly surprised when Marisol served a spread of chicken kebabs, basmati rice, Greek salad, and warm pita bread. Walter muttered something about missing his burger but still managed to clean his plate. They ate like a real family, laughing, swapping stories, and talking about plans for the week ahead. It was only after the dishes had been cleared that Ethan realized something quietly unsettling. He hadn't thought about Alyssa even once all evening. As they gathered in the living room, Marisol leaned in slightly and said in a low voice, "In case you're wondering, I keep Senior Granger on a Mediterranean diet. It's good for his heart." Ethan nodded appreciatively. "Whatever you're doing, it's working. I haven't seen him this energetic in a long time." Leo, normally a ball of energy, had gone unusually quiet. Even kids run out of steam eventually, Ethan thought with a smile. Marisol noticed too. "Bedtime, Carino," she said gently, guiding Leo toward his room. "Half asleep," Leo mumbled. "Can Senior Ethan say goodnight?" Marisol paused. "He's probably busy, Carino." But Ethan stepped in. "I'm happy to." Leo gave him a sleepy hug before rolling over, already slipping into dreamland. Back in the living room, Walter was snoozing in his chair. With Marisol's help, Ethan eased him into bed, startled by how frail his father felt up close. As Ethan grabbed his coat, Marisol stopped him gently. "Why rush off?" she asked, instinctively reaching for his hand, but pulling back. "Can I ask you something?" She led him to the living room wall. "That painting, what's the story behind it?" Ethan raised an eyebrow but followed her gaze. Prominently displayed was a striking, blue-tinged portrait of Marilyn Monroe, clearly a Warhol. It was enclosed in reinforced glass, protected by infrared sensors and pressure-sensitive mounts. "You've been briefed on the security, I take it?" he asked. Marisol nodded. "That's why Leo's banned from this room. He kicked a ball too close once and guards showed up in seconds. Ethan chuckled. So how did my father even land something like this? He smiled, already knowing she'd be surprised. It's a great story, actually. He began explaining. His grandfather had worked as a printer in Germany before World War II. When he fled to the U.S., he arrived with barely anything, not even his full surname. An Ellis Island clerk chopped Morgenstern down to Granger. In New York, he found printing work and eventually passed his trade on to Ethan's father. In the early 60s, Dad got hired at a shop where Warhol's prints were being made. Ethan continued. Marisol's eyes lit up. Wait, the Warhol? Ethan nodded. One night, Dad was working late when Warhol walked in. For no particular reason, he handed Dad that print, signed it with a personal note on the back. Marisol blinked. He just gave it to him? At the time, Warhol's work wasn't worth much, maybe a few $100. He probably never imagined it would skyrocket in value. Marisol frowned slightly. Isn't it risky keeping something like that here? Hardly anyone knows it's here, Ethan reassured her. It's never even been formally appraised. But after that $195 million auction, Dad upgraded the security big time. It's not Fort Knox, but close. She studied the portrait closely. I get it now, she said softly. It's not just art, it's history. It's your family story. Ethan nodded. Exactly. And I admire him for keeping it. Some things aren't for sale. They stood in quiet understanding until Ethan finally said goodnight. As he pulled away, he caught a glimpse of the warmly lit house in his rearview mirror and sighed. I wish my own home felt like that. Lately, his house felt cold and hollow. Alyssa was barely around, and even when she was, it was like living with a ghost. He shook off the thought and turned his focus to the road ahead. Meanwhile, Alyssa stepped out of the motel with a lightness in her step, her entire body humming with satisfaction. Nothing like a little extracurricular therapy to ease the soul, she thought smugly. Bryce Whitaker never failed her. His passion was tireless, rooted in obsession, not just desire. He adored her, worshipped her, and always made sure she left breathless and glowing. But as she drove home, the high began to wear off. The irritation returned like a hangover. Ethan wasn't awful. He wasn't even a bad lover, really. But he lacked fire. He lacked drive. Bryce, on the other hand, thrived in a world of influence among the powerful, the rich, the relevant. And that's where Alyssa knew she belonged. Ethan could spend hours talking about supply and demand, lecturing starry-eyed freshmen on market trends and economic behavior. Alyssa, meanwhile, could barely sit through another faculty dinner filled with dull chatter about publications, peer reviews, and the pursuit of tenure. Her grip on the steering wheel tightened. Once Walter passes and Ethan inherits, I'm out. With her cut from the Warhol sale and whatever came from this house, she'd finally lived the life she deserved, with a man who actually belonged in the world of wealth and prestige. As she pulled into the driveway of their tired old Victorian, the university-issued home with peeling paint and ancient wiring, she let out a smug little laugh. I can endure this eyesore a bit longer. So can Ethan. He has no idea what's coming. The next time Ethan saw Marisol, he knew something was wrong before she even spoke. He had just wrapped up proctoring an exam when she appeared in his office doorway, looking pale and uneasy. His gut nodded immediately. What is it? Is Dad okay? Leo. They're fine, she said quickly, stepping in and closing the door behind her. My mom's with them. She hesitated. Ethan leaned forward, concern etched across his face. Just say it. You know I have family nearby, right? I didn't, no. But go ahead. My sister Natalie. She works at Birch Grove. She's Bryce Whitaker's secretary. Ethan's expression darkened slightly. Okay. Marisol took a breath, then continued, voice careful but firm. She sees Mrs. Granger at work. Every day. Sure. Alyssa works there. Yes, but Marisol paused again, then forced the words out. Ethan. I'm sorry, but your wife and Senior Whitaker, they're having an affair. The words hit like a blow to the chest. His first instinct was disbelief, but deep down, the pieces snapped into place too easily. The late nights. The excuses. The emotional distance. It had been there, right in front of him, all along. How does your sister know this? He asked, jaw clenched. Marisol looked away. We have a cousin who works as a maid at a motel up the highway. Pocono View. 20 miles from here. Ethan's stare hardened. Keep going. They meet there. Pretty regularly. The last time was 2 nights ago, the night you had dinner with us. His mind reeled. He remembered how late Alyssa came home that evening. The rushed explanation about a last-minute client emergency. His fists clenched. Marisol, I can't accuse her of something this serious just based on hearsay, even if it comes from family. I understand, she said softly. That's why I didn't come empty-handed. There's evidence. Come with me. 30 minutes later, they pulled into the parking lot of a modest, rundown motel. Marisol introduced Ethan to her cousin, Camila, a quiet woman with limited English. Marisol translated as Camila led them into a cramped storage room. She climbed onto a stool, removed a vent cover, and reached inside. From behind the dusty grate, she pulled out a small audio recorder. Ethan's stomach churned. Where the hell did that come from? He demanded. Marisol sighed. When Natalie told me about Alyssa and Whitaker, Camila overheard and realized she'd seen them here multiple times. I gave her that recorder. I needed to know the truth. I hope you understand. Ethan barely heard her. Did you listen to it? Marisol nodded. Yes. Camila played it for me. That's when I knew you had to hear it for yourself. Ethan's voice was cold. Play it. Camila hesitated, then pressed the button. Alyssa's voice burst from the speaker, unmistakable and breathless. Oh my God, Bryce. Yes. Yes, don't stop. Camila stopped the playback immediately and shot a nervous glance at Marisol. Do you want her to start from the beginning? Marisol asked gently. Ethan's jaw flexed. No. Skip ahead. Camila adjusted the dial and pressed play again. There was a pause, soft rustling, the rhythmic creak of a bed, before the conversation resumed. Alyssa, you're incredible, Bryce panted. I can't keep living like this. Just say the word, and I'll leave Tessa tomorrow. Don't be stupid, Bryce, Alyssa snapped. We wait until Ethan's father dies. Once he inherits the Warhol, we'll file for divorce. He'll have to sell the painting. I'll walk away with half. Then you can leave Tessa and we can finally be together. Are you sure you'll get half? Bryce asked hesitantly. I thought inheritances were protected. Alyssa laughed, full of smug certainty. Not if you hire the right people. My lawyer's already on it. He's working on contingency, so trust me, he's motivated. Bryce groaned. But how much longer do we have to wait? Patience, babe. Walter's fading fast. It won't be long now. Ethan slammed the stop button, his face darkening. She had it all planned. Cold. Calculated. Ruthless. His rage boiled over, and without thinking, he drove his fist into the counter. The crack echoed through the room, making both women flinch. Without saying a word, he turned and stormed out the door. Marisol quickly hugged Camila, grabbed the recorder, and chased after him. She found him standing beside his car, staring blankly into the street. I tried, he muttered, voice hollow. I really tried. I knew she wasn't happy, but I kept trying to fix things. Now I see I was fighting for something she threw away a long time ago. He turned, face stone cold. Get in. We're going back. The ride was tense, heavy with silence. Eventually, Marisol spoke. Please don't be angry with me. Ethan shook his head. No. You did what you had to. You did me a favor. But Alyssa? He exhaled sharply. I'm done pretending everything's fine. Marisol's voice wavered. You're not planning to do anything reckless, are you? He shot her a look, calm, but focused. Don't worry. I won't destroy myself over her. But I will make sure they both regret every choice they made. She hesitated, then reached out and took his hand. Ethan, don't let this ruin you. He gave her hand a brief squeeze, his gaze far away. I need to talk to my father. He was so proud when I married Alyssa. He really believed we'd build a family together. This is going to crush him. A bitter laugh escaped his lips. It's funny. I used to get so frustrated every time Alyssa said she wasn't ready for kids. Now, all Ethan felt was relief. That familiar ache, longing for connection, for the marriage to work, was gone. They drove in silence, the tension hanging heavy between them like storm clouds. Telling Walter was like ripping open a fresh wound. The old man sat motionless at first, then slowly nodded, a hardened look taking over his tired features. First thing, he rasped, voice rough but unwavering. File for divorce. He added, eyes sharp despite the fatigue dragging at him. I'll call my attorney first thing tomorrow. But don't tip her off. Keep calm until the paperwork's ready. Ethan gave a grim nod. That won't be an issue. We barely speak anymore. He buried himself in work over the next few days, grading papers, preparing lectures, anything to drown out the chaos unfolding in his personal life. It became his refuge, a place where things still made sense. When Walter's lawyer recommended one of the top divorce attorneys in the state, Ethan didn't hesitate. He dialed immediately, only to hear the next available slot wasn't until Thursday. The delay irritated him, but he didn't bother looking elsewhere. If Alyssa's playing dirty, I need someone who knows how to hit back harder. By the time Thursday came around, he knew he'd made the right decision. His attorney, sharp-eyed and razor-focused, wasted no time. "I see exactly what your wife is angling for," she said, flipping through the paperwork like she'd already won the case. "But don't worry, once we file, the Warhol is off limits in the settlement. She won't touch it." She promised to draft the divorce petition that very afternoon and get it filed before the end of the week. Ethan walked out of her office with a flicker of relief for the first time in days. Let them come. Alyssa and Bryce have no idea what's headed their way. But the peace didn't last. Sunday night, his phone rang. Marisol's voice came through frantic, sobbing. "Ethan, oh my God, I'm so sorry. I tried. I really did, His heart slammed against his ribs. "Tried what? What happened? Is Leo okay?" "My dad. It's Senior Granger," she choked out. "The paramedics just got here." The call cut off. Ethan bolted from his chair. He didn't remember grabbing his keys or backing out of the driveway. His brain was running on adrenaline as he blew through red lights, tires screeching around corners. By the time he reached the house, the street was bathed in flashing red and blue. An ambulance, a fire engine, and a cruiser crowded the driveway. He leapt from the car and sprinted toward the porch just as EMTs wheeled out a gurney. "Is he okay?" he shouted, panting. One of the paramedics looked up. "Are you his son?" "Yes." "Is he alive?" The man's expression shifted, softening with grim compassion. "I'm sorry. It was too late. Most likely a major stroke." Ethan's voice broke. "Couldn't you use the paddles? Anything?" The medic shook his head gently. "Even if we'd gotten his heart going again, the brain damage would have been irreversible. You wouldn't have wanted that. Neither would he." Ethan stood frozen as they loaded his father's body into the ambulance. The lights still flashed, but the sirens stayed silent. Only when the vehicle pulled away did his legs finally move. He trudged inside, feet like stone. Marisol met him in the hallway, her face streaked with tears. She collapsed into his arms, and he caught her instinctively. "I'm so sorry," she wept. "I did CPR until they arrived, but it was too fast." He was fine, laughing, and then he grabbed his head and collapsed. It was horrible. He cupped her face gently. "This isn't your fault. The EMTs said it was instant. There was nothing you could have done." Still, she couldn't stop crying. I didn't expect it." One minute he was talking, and the next. Ethan led her to a chair, handed her a glass of water, and gave her time to breathe. Then he asked softly, "Where's Leo?" Her eyes widened. "Dios mío. He's still at school." She grabbed her keys and rushed out, leaving Ethan alone in the silence. He sank into Walter's old armchair, the familiar cushion offering no comfort. He had always known his father's time was limited, but knowing it didn't soften the blow. Tears welled in his eyes. This time, he didn't stop them. For the first time in years, Ethan cried. Alone. And utterly broken. It took nearly an hour before he could collect himself. He pulled out a pad and started making a list, anything to ground himself. Call relatives. Arrange the funeral. Contact the lawyer. The structure helped steady him, if only barely. After the first wave of calls, he locked up the house and headed to Birch Grove. There was one last thing he needed to do, look Alyssa in the eye when he told her. He walked into her office without knocking. She glanced up, startled, then quickly slipped into character, her face melting into a perfectly rehearsed expression of sympathy. "Oh, Ethan," she breathed, rising from her desk. "I'm so sorry. I know how much he meant to you." She reached for his hand, her voice all tenderness. But Ethan saw it, the shallow tears, the fake concern. "She's already thinking about what she gets." He nodded stiffly, muttered, "Thanks," and walked out without another word. The second he left, Alyssa nearly tripped over herself running down the hall. She burst into Bryce's office, cheeks flushed and eyes gleaming. "Bryce," she whispered, almost breathless. "Walter Granger is dead." Bryce blinked, stunned. "Wait, what? You're serious?" Her smile curled with satisfaction. "Dead serious. This is it, the moment we've been waiting for. Ethan inherits everything." "I can't believe it," Bryce said, grinning now. "It's finally happening. I'll file for divorce after the funeral," Alyssa continued, calculating quickly. "I can't do it sooner, bad optics. But once it's over, we're free." We'll finally have the life we deserve. Good, Bryce nodded. Just don't wait too long. I still need time to handle Tessa. The days that followed Walter's death passed in a blur for Ethan. There wasn't time to grieve, not properly. Walter had left instructions for a traditional Jewish burial, which meant everything had to be arranged within 24 hours. Ethan honored every detail down to the last. Once the burial was complete, he organized a separate memorial for friends, colleagues, and neighbors who couldn't attend. Despite everything, he wanted to do it right for Walter. Walter had no surviving family, but his funeral was far from empty. Old friends from his long and accomplished career came to pay their respects, many of them showing up despite travel and age. Ethan's colleagues stood quietly at the memorial, offering brief but sincere condolences that brought him a small, welcome sense of support. But the hardest part wasn't the ceremony itself. It was enduring both the funeral and the memorial with Alyssa by his side. She played the role of heartbroken daughter-in-law with Oscar-worthy precision, teary-eyed, gentle-voiced, all soft sadness and solemn grace. Ethan, though, now saw her performance for what it was: hollow. Every carefully timed sigh, every well-placed tear, only deepened the frozen wall of resentment building inside him. In the middle of that emotional storm, Ethan's phone buzzed. His attorney. "We're ready to finalize the divorce filing," she said. Drained and raw, Ethan paused. "Let me get back to you," he murmured. "Not today. I can't deal with this right now." After the service, while tidying up Walter's house, Marisol approached him quietly. "When should Leo and I move out?" she asked, voice cautious. Ethan turned to her, confused. "Move out? Why would you do that?" She shrugged lightly. "It was your father's home. I thought, maybe it wouldn't feel right staying here anymore." Ethan shook his head firmly. "No, you're not going anywhere." He gestured around them. "The place feels empty without you and Leo. If you leave, it'll sit here unused, a perfect target for break-ins. And Leo's finally thriving. I'm not about to shake up his life now." Marisol's tense shoulders softened, her eyes filling with emotion. "Thank you, Ethan. That means more than you know." With the funeral behind him, Ethan redirected his focus toward the estate. Walter's lawyer patiently walked him through the probate process, explaining that sorting through everything could take months. But then, almost as an afterthought, the attorney added, "Your father requested a formal reading of his will." He left a very specific list of who's to be present. As the lawyer read the names aloud, Ethan felt the pieces fall into place. His lips curled into a dry, knowing smile. "Let's make it official," he said. "Send formal invitations. The kind they can't ignore." "Consider it done," the lawyer replied with a nod. When the day came, Ethan and Alyssa arrived separately. They acknowledged each other with cool, tight nods and nothing more. Since Walter's death, barely a word had passed between them, though Ethan couldn't miss the flicker of anticipation beneath Alyssa's composed expression. Marisol entered discreetly, introduced herself to the lawyer, and took a seat near the back. Alyssa leaned toward Ethan, whispering with venom, "Why is she even here?" "Because she was invited," he replied, his voice calm and edged with steel. Before Alyssa could press further, the door opened again, and Bryce Whitaker walked in, looking utterly confused. "Bryce." Alyssa gasped, springing from her seat. "What are you doing here?" He held up the formal envelope. "I got one of these." No idea why. The lawyer stood, straightening his papers. "Thank you all for coming. This reading was explicitly requested by Mr. Walter Granger prior to his passing." He adjusted his glasses and began. First, Walter Granger named his son, Ethan Granger, as executor of the estate. He will be responsible for handling debts and the distribution of assets. Across the room, Alyssa exchanged a smug glance with Bryce. Ethan caught it, but didn't react. His expression remained unreadable. "The next item concerns Mr. Granger's residence," the lawyer continued. "Walter Granger bequeathed the house and all surrounding property to Ms. Marisol Vega in gratitude for her devoted care during the final years of his life. Additionally, she is to receive the remaining funds in his personal checking account for household needs." The room erupted. "Excuse me," Alyssa shrieked, leaping from her chair. "That house belongs to Ethan, not to some maid." Marisol looked just as stunned. "There must be a mistake," she said quietly. "Ethan should have the house." The lawyer remained calm. "There's no mistake. The will is very clear. Shall I continue?" The room fell into tense silence. "The next item pertains to the Warhol painting displayed in Mr. Granger's living room," he continued, flipping the page. "He has donated the piece to Birch Grove Mansion and Museum, where it will become part of their permanent collection." Bryce inhaled sharply. Alyssa's face twisted in disbelief. That's absurd. That painting belongs to Ethan. How could Walter do this? The lawyer didn't flinch. The will is explicit, Mrs. Granger. However, this bequest is conditional. The temperature in the room dropped. He cleared his throat. The conditions are as follows. 1. Birch Grove must immediately and permanently sever all professional connections with Mrs. Alyssa Granger. 2. Mr. Bryce Whitaker must immediately and permanently end all personal involvement with Mrs. Granger. A thick silence followed. If either party fails to comply, the lawyer continued, the painting will instead be donated to the Andy Warhol Museum in Pittsburgh. And before you ask, Mr. Whitaker, the museum has already been notified. They will be monitoring the conditions closely. Alyssa shot to her feet, her entire body vibrating with fury. This is insane. Walter had no right to dictate my personal life from the grave. She rounded on Ethan, face flushed. This is your doing. You're trying to steal what's mine. Ethan leaned back in his chair, voice low and even. I wouldn't cheat you, Alyssa. Actually, I brought exactly what you're entitled to. He slid a sealed envelope across the table. Alyssa snatched it, tore it open, and froze. Her eyes went wide. What is this? She spat. Your official notice, Ethan said flatly. I've already filed. Before she could react, he raised his phone, snapped a photo of her stunned face, and stood. Consider yourself served, Alyssa Granger. Back at Birch Grove, Alyssa stormed into Bryce's office, cheeks flushed and breathing fast. This isn't a loss, she insisted, trying to sound composed. It's an opportunity. That Warhol will make Birch Grove the envy of every museum in the state. And now, finally, nothing stands between us. But Bryce didn't look inspired. He sat stiffly behind his desk, lips pressed into a thin line. You heard the terms, right? The conditions attached to the bequest. Alyssa waved a hand like swatting away smoke. That clause won't hold up. Let people talk. Who cares about some jealous whispers? His patience snapped. You think the board is going to pick a fight with the Warhol Museum? The Carnegie Foundation is backing them. A lawsuit would destroy us. Bryce stood abruptly, pulled a folder from his desk, and dropped it in front of her. I already spoke to Mr. Renshaw. These are your termination papers. You're out. Alyssa's face flushed dark red. After everything we've been through, you're cutting me off? Just like that. Her voice turned ice cold. Do you really want me to tell your wife about us? Bryce's face didn't flinch. I already did. I'm going home to beg for forgiveness and pray the title of executive director's wife is enough to make her overlook my idiocy. He motioned to the door. It's over. Your severance check is in the mail. Leave the mansion. Alyssa stood there trembling, fists tight at her sides. Bryce braced for a meltdown, but she said nothing. She turned sharply and marched out, her heels slicing through the silence with each angry step. She made her way to her former office, gathered a few personal items without ceremony, and shoved them into her handbag. On the way out, she passed Maya at her desk. Calling it an early day, Mrs. Granger? Maya asked sweetly, lacing her tone with smug sarcasm. Shut up, Alyssa hissed, not even breaking stride. Maya smirked. Bye, honey, she sang as the glass doors swung shut behind Alyssa. Without missing a beat, she turned to Natalie's desk, grinning. You won't believe what just happened. Later that evening, Ethan was rummaging in the fridge for dinner when he heard keys jangling at the front door. He closed the fridge just as Alyssa stepped inside. Her shoulders drooped, her face pale and drawn, but the moment she saw him, that old fury flickered back to life. This is all because of you, she snapped. How long have you known about me and Bryce? Ethan didn't even blink. Long enough to dismantle your little scheme. She narrowed her eyes. So you convinced Walter to rewrite his will? He was going to leave everything to you, and you turned him against me. Why? What did I ever do to deserve that? Ethan's jaw tightened. Because I wasn't going to let you profit from his death. He stepped closer. I knew what you planned, declaring the Warhol as shared marital property, hiding it behind Birch Grove's insurance fund. You were going to sell it out from under me. So yes, I made sure that couldn't happen. Exposing your affair? That was just a bonus. Alyssa let out a sharp, bitter laugh. So you hate me that much? Ethan's voice dropped to a cool, deadly calm. After what you tried to pull? Absolutely. For a moment, something flickered in her expression, genuine surprise, maybe even regret. But it didn't last. Ethan looked at her, quieter now. Tell me something. Was there ever a time you loved me? Or was I always just a means to an end? Alyssa sighed and slumped onto the couch. I think I did love you. Once. You were ambitious. Sharp. I thought you'd rise to the top, and I'd be right there with you. Her lips twisted. But then you settled for teaching. You turned your back on power, prestige, everything. That's when I realized I'd bet on the wrong man. So yeah, I went looking for something better. Ethan's face was unreadable. So that's it. Status and money were more important than the life we built together. Alyssa scoffed. A life? That's what people tell themselves when they've given up. Family, stability, community, those are crutches for people who lack ambition. Ethan stared at her in stunned silence. I want influence, she continued coldly. The kind that comes from being wealthy and connected. Everything else is just decoration. He opened his mouth, but closed it again. There was nothing to say. She'd made her choice long before tonight. So, he asked finally, what's your next move? Her shoulders sagged for the first time, the weight of reality setting in. I'm leaving, she said quietly. Thanks to you. My name's Mud. I'll pack up tonight and be gone by morning. I won't fight the divorce. She exhaled sharply. We split what's left. I'll take half the savings, half the house proceeds. Ethan crossed his arms. What house? She blinked. This house. He shook his head. This place belongs to the university, Alyssa. We don't own it. Her jaw clenched. Of course. Clever as ever. Too bad you never matched that with real ambition. Without waiting for a response, she turned and disappeared down the hallway. 15 minutes later, she reappeared with a suitcase in one hand, a garment bag in the other, and a cosmetics case slung over her shoulder. She didn't say goodbye. And Ethan didn't stop her. I'm done here, Alyssa announced, her voice flat and cold. My lawyer will be in touch with yours. Let's wrap this up fast. She paused in the doorway, casting Ethan one final, bitter smile. At least we agree on something, we both want out. Ethan leaned against the doorframe, arms crossed as he studied her. Where will you go? She lifted her chin, defiant despite the bags under her eyes. As far away as I can. Somewhere I can start over, with someone who actually knows how to win. The door slammed shut behind her, and just like that, she was gone. Ethan stood in the quiet hallway, staring at the door for a moment before exhaling slowly. A faint, almost surprised smile touched his lips. Good riddance. True to her word, Alyssa didn't drag things out. The divorce moved quickly, the paperwork rolling through the courts at record pace. Ethan hated the idea of paying spousal support, but considering her spectacular fall from grace, he accepted it as a final tax on his freedom. His lawyer had put it best. Frankly, it's a bargain. You dodged a grenade. Meanwhile, Ethan turned his attention to the never-ending list of tasks required to finalize Walter's affairs. He filed death certificates, notified Social Security, contacted creditors, and worked his way through a mountain of legal paperwork. Walter had kept his finances the old-fashioned way, paper checks, handwritten ledgers, physical receipts. Ethan hadn't used a checkbook this much since college. Weeks passed before he finally transitioned everything into digital accounts, and by then, the routine had become oddly grounding. It also kept him close to Marisol and Leo. His campus housing felt cold and temporary. Walter's home, though shadowed by memory, was alive, full of warmth, full of presence. Ethan started staying late, ostensibly to finish paperwork, but in truth, for the company. Marisol never minded. Cooking for two is awkward, she'd say with a smile. Stay for dinner, Ethan. Please. Even after the estate was mostly settled, her invitations kept coming, and Ethan found he never wanted to say no. Dinner turned into evenings. Evenings into laughter, shared stories, and the quiet comfort of being together. What had once been a space of grief slowly began to shift. It wasn't about obligation anymore. It started to feel like home. A few weeks later, his phone buzzed. Walter's attorney was on the line. The probate court just signed off on the final documents, the lawyer said. You're officially authorized to distribute the estate per the terms of the will. Ethan blinked. Already? I thought this usually dragged on for months. The lawyer chuckled. Normally, yes. But I suspect Birch Grove's board pulled a few strings. They're eager to get their hands on that painting. Ethan ran a hand through his hair and sighed. Right. Time to get it over with. Barely an hour later, his phone rang again. Bryce Whitaker. When can Birch Grove expect delivery of the Warhol? Bryce asked, too polite to sound sincere. As you know, the museum and I have honored all the terms laid out in Mr. Granger's will. Now that probate is finalized, we're ready to proceed. Ethan gritted his teeth. The legal red tape had cleared, but that didn't mean everything would go smoothly. The museum's head curator insisted on handling the packing and transport herself. Meanwhile, the security company required one of their technicians on site to disable the system. Coordinating both teams turned into a logistical mess. What should have been a simple transfer became a multi-day ordeal. Bryce, pacing his office like a kid waiting for Christmas morning, barely contained his anticipation. By tomorrow, he thought with satisfaction, Birch Grove will finally have its crown jewel. He didn't spare a thought for Alyssa. That disaster was behind him. All that mattered now was the museum's future and his own. While the moving pieces fell into place, Ethan decided to escape the chaos. He invited Marisol and Leo on a quick trip to the Poconos. They hiked shaded forest trails, ate lunch at the rustic Flagstaff Lodge, and rode the Lehigh Gorge Scenic Railway. Leo's laughter echoed off the mountains, light and carefree. By the time they returned home, the sun had dipped below the trees. The security guard had clocked out for the evening, the alarm system had been disarmed, and the house looked just as they had left it, almost. Something was missing. The bold, iconic gaze of Marilyn Monroe no longer smiled from the living room wall. The absence was jarring. Ethan stared at the blank space, a quiet hollowness settling in. The room felt off. Trying to shift the mood, he clapped his hands together. Too late to cook. Who's in the mood for pizza? Leo cheered, and Marisol laughed, the tension easing. They ate around the kitchen table, swapping stories and jokes from their day. By the time the last crust was gone, exhaustion had replaced the energy of the trip. Leo nodded off on the couch, limbs tangled in a blanket. Ethan lifted him gently and carried him to bed. As he turned to leave, Marisol stepped into the hallway, blocking his path. "Ethan," she said softly, eyes full of concern, "would you stay tonight?" He hesitated. "Marisol, I don't want to intrude." "Please," she whispered, "just for my peace of mind. The alarm's not on, and the house feels different. Stay in Walter's room. Just for tonight." Ethan looked at her for a moment. She was tired, vulnerable, and maybe, like him, not quite ready to be alone. He gave a quiet nod. "Okay, just for tonight." Later, after she'd retreated to her room, Ethan changed into a t-shirt and boxers, then settled into his father's bed. The mattress felt foreign beneath him. The air still held traces of Walter, books, cologne, memory. Sleep didn't come easily, but eventually exhaustion pulled him under. And for the first time in a long while, he didn't dream about Alyssa. Sometime after midnight, a faint sound stirred Ethan from sleep. He sat up slowly, heart pounding, straining to catch the noise again. There it was, soft, deliberate footsteps padding down the hallway. The door creaked open, and through the pale moonlight filtering in from the window, he saw her. Marisol stood in the doorway, her silhouette quiet, motionless, bathed in silver. Without a word, she stepped inside and crossed the room. "Marisol," Ethan whispered, startled. "What are you doing?" She reached him and gently placed a finger to his lips. "Please," she murmured, voice barely audible and trembling. "It's been so long. I'm tired of being alone." Before he could speak again, her hand dropped, and her lips replaced it. Her kiss was urgent, trembling with hunger and need. Whatever hesitation Ethan might have felt dissolved in that moment. He kissed her back, pulling her closer, the ache of loneliness replaced by the warmth of her body and the electricity between them. His arm tightened around her waist. One hand slid up, fingertips brushing the thin strap of her nightgown. Marisol's hands moved with equal need, slipping beneath the waistband of his boxers with quiet purpose. He sat up, discarding what little clothing remained, and helped her lift the nightgown over her head. For a second, moonlight caught her figure, all strength and softness and vulnerability. But Marisol gave him no time to linger. "No," she whispered, her breath hot against his ear. "I need you now. Please, Ethan, don't make me wait anymore." That was all it took. The last of his restraint crumbled. He eased her back against the pillows, settling between her parted thighs. Their breathing quickened in sync. "Yes," she gasped, arching toward him. "Oh, Ethan, don't hold back." He didn't. It had been too long for both of them, and in that moment, there was nothing left to wait for. The next morning, Ethan and Marisol sat in the kitchen, quietly sharing coffee, the silence between them filled with something unspoken, but peaceful. Across town, however, chaos had begun. At Birch Grove, Bryce Whitaker had started his day basking in victory. Today was supposed to be his crowning achievement, but the illusion unraveled quickly. Just hours before the highly anticipated unveiling, the museum's curator called, her voice tight, laced with panic. "Mr. Whitaker, we've got a problem. Bryce's brow furrowed. What now? The caterer's setting up, she said quickly, but the art movers are refusing to continue. They say the security system wasn't properly deactivated. They won't touch the Warhol under these conditions. Bryce slammed a hand on his desk. Then find another company. It's not that simple, the curator snapped. They're union. Without certified deactivation and documentation, they won't move the piece. Meanwhile, the caterer's asking what to do with all the food. Throw it out, donate it. I don't care if it's caviar and gold leaf. Just get it out of here, he barked. Understood, the curator muttered before hanging up. Bryce dropped into his chair, burying his face in his hands. This can't be happening. Not today. A moment later, a voice like a whip cracked through the silence. Would you care to explain why I had to walk from the front gate while your staff runs around like they've seen a ghost? Bryce's head jerked up. Standing in the doorway, flushed and furious, was Clayton Renshaw, chairman of Birch Grove's board. Bryce scrambled upright. Sir, we narrowly avoided a disaster. There was a complication with the Warhol. I thought it best to cancel rather than risk a public mess. Renshaw's eyes narrowed. What kind of complication, Bryce? Bryce swallowed. Sir, it appears the Warhol was a counterfeit. Renshaw's face darkened. A fake. His voice dropped into something cold and lethal. How the hell did that happen? You're supposed to be the expert. Didn't anyone authenticate the piece before you paraded it across press releases and gala invites? Bryce threw up his hands. I understand how this looks, but Walter had Fort Knox-level security around that painting. We were rushed. Probate, security, movers, it was all a mess. Enough, Renshaw snapped. Birch Grove will be humiliated. And make no mistake, the board holds you accountable. Bryce stood frozen, pale as plaster. You're fired, Renshaw said flatly. Effective immediately. Clean out your office, navigate the traffic jam you caused, and don't come back. Bryce opened his mouth to protest, but Renshaw had already turned and walked out, ignoring the stunned receptionist nearby. He collapsed back into his chair, hands shaking as he buried his face again. This can't be happening, he whispered. I'm done. No museum will touch me now. He sat in silence until his secretary appeared, hesitant and wide-eyed. Sir, she said softly, your wife is on the line. Bryce didn't move. She said if you don't take this call, you might as well not come home tonight. He exhaled, barely holding it together. Put her through. The phone clicked, and then Bryce. Tessa exploded. You better have a damn good reason for this. I've been stuck in gridlock for an hour, surrounded by people asking why the gala was canceled. I look like a fool. And I'm your wife. Her voice rose, furious. If you were trying to humiliate me publicly, congratulations. You nailed it. Now talk. What the hell happened? Bryce sagged, rubbing his forehead. It's simple, he said quietly. When we opened the crate, the Warhol turned out to be a fake. A fake? Tessa shrieked. Yes, he confirmed grimly. We had no choice. We couldn't display a forgery. We didn't realize the painting was a fake. Not until it was far too late, Bryce admitted, each word landing like a lead weight. He hesitated, dread churning in his stomach. And when something like this happens, someone's got to take the fall. He paused. Renshaw fired me. Effective immediately. A long silence stretched out before Tessa finally spoke. Her voice, when it came, was like ice over broken glass. Renshaw fired you? Just like that. A short, bitter laugh followed. Honestly, Bryce? I'm almost impressed. She took a slow breath, her tone sharpening into a blade. Listen carefully. I've ignored more than I should have. The ego, the backdoor deals, even your affair with that tramp you handpicked as development director. I looked the other way for the sake of appearances. A beat. Then the final blow. But this is the end. Don't bother coming home. My attorney will file first thing in the morning. Pack your things. And don't come back. Bryce sagged, his voice barely a whisper. Yes, dear. The call went dead. Across town, Marisol rushed into Ethan's office, breathless with excitement. Ethan, she exclaimed. Natalie just called, Bryce Whitaker got fired. The Warhol turned out to be fake. They canceled the unveiling, and Renshaw threw him out on the spot. Ethan leaned back in his chair, a slow, satisfied smile spreading across his face. Not exactly a surprise, he said coolly. I told you I'd make sure he paid for what he did. Marisol frowned, confused. But how could you have predicted this? I didn't predict it, Ethan said, chuckling. Not exactly. But I set the stage. And from there, all it needed was gravity. She tilted her head. Set the stage? What do you mean? Come with me, he said, standing. I'll show you. Back in his campus office, Ethan pulled out a chair for Marisol, then sat across from her. Let's start with Alyssa, he began. Her plan was pretty simple. Stay with me until my father died. Once Walter passed, she knew I'd inherit everything. Then she'd file for divorce and claim half. Marisol nodded slowly, listening. She never really cared about the house. What she was after was the Warhol. Her lawyer had this angle, argue that the painting, even though inherited, could be reclassified as shared marital property. And if that worked, Marisol added, eyes narrowing, she and Bryce would have walked away with millions. Exactly, Ethan said. But that's where things unraveled. Thanks to Natalie and Camila, I got the proof I needed. The affair. The whole setup. After that, he continued, I went straight to my father. He'd originally planned to leave the Warhol to me. But once he heard what Alyssa was planning, he agreed to change the will, gave it to Birch Grove instead. Marisol's eyes widened. So she couldn't claim it in the divorce, right? Ethan confirmed. But that was just phase one. The real trap was the condition in the will. Birch Grove could only receive the Warhol if they cut all ties with Alyssa. That meant firing her. And once the board accepted the bequest, they were stuck. Renshaw wasn't going to risk losing that painting over a scandal. So Alyssa became expendable. And so did Bryce, Marisol said, slowly shaking her head. He dropped her the moment she became a liability. Ethan nodded, his smile cold and unrepentant. She thought he'd stand by her. But he was only ever loyal to ambition. He leaned back, thoughtful. Her entire world collapsed in a single afternoon. Her job, her marriage, her affair gone. Just like I planned. Marisol let out a slow breath. What happened to her after the divorce? Ethan's grin turned wry. Last I heard, she's living in Allentown. Couldn't find work in development. She's selling insurance now. Telemarketing. Cold calls. Marisol's eyebrows shot up. Insurance? After all her scheming, all her smug superiority. Oh yeah, Ethan said, arms folded. The woman who sneered at anyone without wealth or pedigree now begs strangers to buy coverage. Irony's a beautiful thing. Marisol's gaze softened, but her voice stayed steady. I understand why you wanted revenge. She betrayed you and tried to steal from your family. But how did you manage to take Bryce down, too? Ethan's smile returned, sharper this time. You know about the fake Warhol, right? Bits and pieces, Marisol admitted. Honestly, I was more upset that Senior Granger's painting turned out not to be real. It felt like losing part of him. Ethan's expression shifted, gentler now. The fact that your first thought was about my dad tells me everything I need to know about you. He stood, walked to a filing cabinet, and pulled out a well-worn manila folder. Inside was the Marilyn Monroe print he'd used in his lectures for years. He laid it on the desk between them. Marisol stared. I know this one. It's the teaching print you always show your students. Ethan nodded. Flip it over. She did, and gasped. There, hidden beneath a layer of paper, was a fading handwritten note. To Walter Granger, thanks for everything. Andy Warhol. Her eyes went wide. This is the painting? Ethan smiled. The original. The real one. Her jaw dropped. But it's been here the whole time? How did you pull that off? My dad and I swapped it out years ago, Ethan explained. Back when Warhol pieces were still relatively cheap. Dad got nervous about keeping something valuable hanging openly, so we agreed. I'd keep the real one safe here, and he'd hang a replica. Marisol shook her head, astonished. And all that security? Ethan chuckled. Oh, he went overboard on purpose. Cameras, sensors, pressure pads. The whole circus. It became a game to him. The more ridiculous the system, the more legit the fake looked. I think he loved the idea that everyone bought it. Marisol blinked. So you made the switch before I ever worked there? Exactly. Originally, I planned to return it after Dad passed. But once I learned what Alyssa and Bryce were plotting, well, let's just say the timing worked out. He sat back, his voice calm. I let Bryce chase the painting he thought was worth millions. I let Alyssa think she could play me. And I let them both walk straight into their own downfall. Marisol stared, speechless. Now what? She asked softly. I'm letting Birch Grove cool off, Ethan said. Once things settle, I'll go to the board. Tell them I found the real Warhol tucked away in one of my father's forgotten storage bins. Let them verify it. Then I'll offer to donate it, on one condition, they display it with a plaque honoring my dad. Marisol frowned. Don't you regret giving it up? That painting's worth a fortune. Ethan laughed. Not even a little. I never wanted something that heavy hanging over me. The money? That was always her obsession, not mine. He stood and came around the desk, gently taking Marisol's hands. What mattered most to Alyssa was status. But this whole nightmare showed me what actually matters. Marisol's expression softened, uncertainty flickering in her eyes. And what's that, Senor Ethan? He held her gaze. You, Leo, and me. She froze, eyes widening. What do you mean? A family, Ethan said softly. I mean the three of us. Together. For a moment, Marisol didn't move. Then her lips parted in a breathless smile, eyes shimmering. Are you sure? Really sure. Ethan pulled her close, his voice steady. I've never been more certain. Life's too short for regrets. I want this. I want us. Outside the office, a passing graduate student happened to glance in through the glass. She paused, watching the quiet embrace inside. A slow, knowing smile tugged at the corners of her mouth. She reached for her phone and whispered into it. Hey, remember how we were all worried about Professor Granger after everything blew up? Yeah. Well, it looks like he finally found his happy ending.